I think this is my fifth lecture on this topic. If you like my talks, I would request you to contribute to any charity or any cause which is dear to you, a small amount. You need not tell me that you have done so, but if you did, I would be delighted. Yeah. Let me first summarize what I said in my last talk. Last talk was about Sankhya and Yoga. What I said was this. I'll give you in few sentences so that this is useful from now. Sankhya does not need God. Yoga, on the other hand, is Sankhya with God. Sankhya says there are two entities, Prakriti and Purusha. Both are real. Prakriti, which is matter, is singular. Purusha, which means self or consciousness, are many and hence plural. Purusha is conscious, but it doesn't produce anything. It gets attracted to Prakriti like iron bits to a magnet. The combination of the two make Prakriti produce the sensory and motor organs, both subtle and gross. The Prakriti also has Mahat or Buddhi, Ahankara and Manas. In Yoga, Buddhi is the prime thing, and it is from Buddhi, Ahankara and Manas evolve. The gunas are also attributed to Prakriti. You know what those gunas are, no? Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. It is because of these interactions of Prakriti and Purusha that samsara happens, the cycle of birth and death. To get a release from Purusha, it should get itself away from Prakriti. It should leave Prakriti alone and it should not think of it. The liberation is only for Purushas. Both Purushas and Prakriti are eternal. Yoga, on the other hand, advocates the discipline of rigorous practices to attain liberation. God, the Parama Purusha, will help the other lesser Purushas in attaining liberation. Now, before I start on Nyaya and Vaisheshika, let me tell you about Sutra, not Shudra, Sutra. Sutra, in Sanskrit, it means a thread or a string, and in philosophy, it means a brief aphoristic composition. The early Indian philosophers did not work with written texts, and later often avoided or disdained the use of text. Thus, there was a need for explanatory works of the utmost brevity that could be committed to memory. The earliest sutras were expositions of ritual procedures, but their use spread. The grammatical sutras by the Sanskrit grammarian Panini became in many respects a model for later sutras. All systems of Indian philosophy, of course, the Sankhya had his Karikas or doctrinal verses. Other than that, all the systems of Indian philosophy had their own sutras, most of which were preserved in writing very early in the Common Era. Now let us come to Nyaya and Vaisheshika. Like Sankhya and Yoga, Nyaya and Vaisheshika are also twins. Nyaya means critical examination of a text or a scripture. Though it's not why this name was given to a system of philosophy. Vaisheshika means special or particular. Let's say Nyaya is Sada Dosa, this is special dosa. Vaisheshika is special dosa. The source book of these systems, which are Nyaya Sutra and Vaisheshika Sutra, is attributed to Gautama and Kanada. Nothing is known of either. The dates when these sutras were written are also conjectural. Jacobi says Nyaya must have been written sometime in the 2nd century CE and Vaisheshika somewhat earlier. But unlike Sankhya, Mimamsaka and Vedanta, the tradition does not trace these philosophies to great antiquity. Thus, some scholars think that they might have taken a century or two before the Common Era, before taking a shape. In fact, interestingly, Gautama is also called Akshapata, which means one who has eyes on his feet. Maybe he was given the name because of the thoroughly practical and empirical attitude that characterized his philosophy. Similarly, Kanad means atom meter. Vaisheshika speaks about atoms or anu at length. There is little doubt that Nyaya philosophy originated from the studies in the methodology of public debate. It was in fact more or less a textbook on the technique of public, the treatise on the public of in the technique of public debate. It is also called Anvikshiki, which means logic or philosophy. The commentator Vatsayana tells us what makes Nyaya distinct. He says, Nyaya is the examination of things with the help of evidence, that is, pramana. An argument based on observation and received belief is called an anviksha or reconsideration, and the discipline is known as anvikshiki or nyaya. This means it pertains to arguments, or in simple terms, it simply means rational investigation. Even at the very beginning of Nyaya Sutra, it says that knowledge of 16 things lead to liberation of the soul, that is, from the release from the cycle of life and death. What are these 16 things is very, very interesting, We should know what these 16 things are. They are pramana, prameya, samsaya, prayojana, drishtanta, siddhanta, avayava, tarka, the nirnaya, vada, jalpa, vidanda, hetva bhasha, chala, jati, then nigrahasthana. Nyaya, in fact, we will analyze one by one these 16 things. That is what entire Nyaya philosophy is all about. They are very, very interesting. Please bear with me. Nyaya, as I said earlier, accepts 4 valid forms of pramana. They are pratyaksha pramana, anumana pramana, upamana pramana, and sabda pramana. That is perception, inference, analogy, and testimony. Now, pratyaksha should be, Nyaya says, should be determinate, unnamed, and consistent. What is determinate? We should know what is indeterminate. What is indeterminate is inability to find out what is actually happening. Let's say you find some foggy thing in the mountain. You do not know whether it is smoke or dust. So you are not sure about that. Okay. A pratyaksha pramana should not be like that. That's what Nyaya Sastra says. And what is unnamed? It simply means that the name of the subject has no connection with the knowledge of it derived from your own perception or experience. This is very, very important. The name has nothing to do with your perception. Let's say X is called Satya, but you know that he tells only lies. Or for instance, take our own parlor. We know that milk doesn't flow in the river. Okay, so this is unnamed. And what is consistent? See, what is consistent is when our knowledge is actualized, it becomes consistent. That is, for instance, we perceive water in a marriage, but we can't drink it. Okay, so we know that, we perceive water, but still we know that we can't drink it. The same way they talk about, inference analogy. I don't want to waste your time. But Nyaya says that Sabda, that is testimony, should be the instructive assertion of a reliable person, that is Apta. That is one who is possessed of true knowledge and is truthful. The scholars of Veda and Upanishads come under this category. Now, we'll come to the next one. What is Prameya? Nyaya identifies 12 objects. That is Sarira, body, Indriya, senses, intelligence, that is Buddhi, then Pravritti, various activities, then Phala, what is consequence, then Pratyabhava, that is rebirth, then Atma, self, Artha, that is experiences, then Manas, which is intellect, then Doshas, there is imbalances, then Dukkha, and finally Apavarka, which is liberation. There are many things that may be regarded as topic of right knowledge, but Nyaya says these two are especially significant because the true knowledge about them will dispel all delusions and lead to freedom from suffering, while false knowledge concerning these topics perpetuate rebirth and suffering. Let me go to the third thing. The third thing is samsaya. Samsaya means doubt. Doubt must not be confused with error, which is false knowledge. Doubt is incomplete knowledge which serves as an incentive for further investigation. It is therefore a very positive and a desirable quality to have. There are 4 kinds of doubts. Perception of common properties or failure to perceive the difference. That is, in the dark, a coiled rope is mistaken for a snake. You doubt that it could be a snake, but it may not be a snake. Okay. On the other hand, it may be a snake. Then the doubt will be cleared when the light is on. Okay. Conflicting testimonies of witnesses or differing opinions on the same subject by 2 or more people. Okay. If there are 2 persons, whom you respect, they say 2 different things. Okay, so you have a doubt, and finally you will get that doubt will be cleared finally through experience. The third is irregularity of perception. That is, you see water, perhaps there is real water, you think it is mirage, or when the mirage is there, you think that it is real water. When you go near that the irregularity of perception gets resolved. Okay. Or hearing the rustles of leaves in a bush, there could be a human being or there could be an animal. Okay. Like Dasharatha, he heard the rustle and fired an arrow and killed a human being. He thought it was an animal. So he should have the doubt, he didn't have the doubt, so he suffered. Okay. Irregularity of non-perception, that is a 4th kind of doubt. Which means being unable to believe that something exists based on never having perceived a thing with qualities as described, or inability to believe that such a thing exists. This is a very, very simple thing. Like a human being with a tail. You have never seen a human being with a tail. Okay. So if someone says that I have seen a human being with a tail, you will doubt it. The fourth important thing which Nyaya emphasizes is prayojana, that is purpose. He says a wise person never engages in purposeless action. The next one is drishtanta, that is corroborative evidence. The thing about which a layman and an expert have the same opinion. This is known as the familiar example or a common observation both by common folk and experts. For instance, both scientists and laymen accept the general proposition that whenever there is rain, there must be clouds. Therefore, such an example can be used in the process of reasoning from the known to the unknown. The next thing is conclusion, that is Siddhanta. Siddhanta is a conclusion that is recognized as being logically proven by a certain school of philosophy. There are four kinds of Siddhanta. One is a commonly accepted truth, that is a tenet which is not opposed by any school of philosophy and which is claimed by at least one school. For instance, all major systems of Hindu philosophy accept the karma theory, or they accept that earth, water, light, air and ether are the five basic elements, or smell, taste, color, touch and sound as the objects of five senses. Almost all major philosophies accept this. Then a peculiar truth, which is accepted by some schools and rejected by the opposite schools. For instance, Buddhists believe that the world is unreal, while Sankhya-vadis believe, or Vaisheshikas or Nyaya-vadis believe that the world is real. The next Siddhanta is a consequential truth, that is, which is a tenet, if accepted, lead to the acceptance of another tenet. That is, if you accept, I'll give an example, if you accept that the world needs a creator, that person, that's one tenet, then the next tenet is that person has to be extraordinary, that you will have to accept. Unless he is not extraordinary, he won't be able to create the world. Then the other one is an implied truth. An implied truth is a tenet which is not explicitly declared as such, but which follows from the examinations of particulars concerning it. For instance, if a discussion whether the age of consent should be 18 implies that people of that age and above are capable of deciding when and with whom to have sex. It's simple. Okay, that is not discussed, but that is an implied one. While we are discussing the age of consent, what is implied is this, that when and with whom the young man should be capable, the young person should be capable of deciding when and with whom to have sex. Okay. Then we come to the avayavas of reasoning. This is very, very important. This is a very important system of logic, the syllogism in fact. It says there are 5 logical steps used in a syllogism to establish right knowledge. One is proposition, which is pratigya, is a statement of the thing that is to be proved. The second is reason, that is the argument used to, the hetu in fact, the argument used to prove the proposition. The third is udharana, that is generally accepted as an instance of a similar thing. You give an example, okay, that's what you are giving. Fourth is application, that is upanaya, which means consistency of drawing the comparison. And finally, nigamana, that is the conclusion, final conclusions. Okay, I will give an example. Let's say the proposition is Krishnan is mortal. This is a proposition. This is the first proposition. Why are you saying this? The reason is Krishna is mortal because he is a human being. As an example, you say all human beings were born are mortal. Say Mahatma Gandhi was mortal, Nehru was mortal, Napoleon was mortal. You can go on, keep on saying this. The fourth thing is application. Krishna is also a human being. Okay. Conclusion, the final conclusion is therefore Krishna is mortal. This is the syllogism. This is the logic which Nyaya uses in its discussion. Yeah. The next Nyaya says what should be avoided is, fallacious reasoning, that is Hetva Bhasha, which means there are 5 types of, irregular ways of, reasoning. One is, if the reason given leads to more than one conclusions. Okay. That is, there are saints living in caves in high Himalayas. There are snow leopards lives in high Himalayas. Okay. So, the conclusion cannot be that all snow leopards are saints or all leopards are, all saints are snow leopards. Okay. So, there are 2 separate conclusions. Saints can also live in the caves and snow leopards also can live in caves. Okay. The second example is self-contradictory. Let's say, if someone says that sound is eternal because it is produced. Okay, this is self-contradictory because whatever is eternal cannot be produced. Here, the reason contradicts what is to be proved. Eternal and produced are contradictory attributes and mutually exclusive. The third is the inconclusive or begging the question. I will give an example. The human body is non-eternal because it does not possess the attributes of eternality. Now, non-eternal is the same as not possessing the attributes of eternality. So this is begging the question. The same thing you are repeating, the tautology, this is. The fourth is unproven, The reason which stands in need of proof the same way as the proposition does. Okay. For instance, all Buddhists are vegetarians because they believe in ahimsa. Here, Buddhists are vegetarian remain unproven. They are not, that it is not proven at all. Okay. The other one is the fallacious reason is contradictory, reasoning. If when you say that fire is always cool, your experience, says otherwise. Or if you say that water is always solid, your experience says otherwise. Okay, it's not always solid. Okay. Tarka. Tarka is, Tarka is a method of attaining knowledge of truth about an unknown or uncertain thing by comparing and then gradually eliminating all the competing suppositions. Let us say someone tells you that is a soul a product or a non-product. Product means one which is produced or one which is existence. That is eternal, let us say. If the soul is a non-product, it will experience the result of its action and will, on the eradication of the process of rebirth, attain release from the cycle of birth and rebirth. Okay. Therefore, rebirth and release are indeed possible. But if it is a product, this will not be possible because a product has to die. Okay, because soul's connection with the body, mind, senses will not be the result of its own action, nor will it experience the fruit of its own action. Because the product will have to die. Okay. So the phenomenon of rebirth and release is well known. That's what the philosophy says. It's not well known, but the philosophy says the phenomenon of rebirth and release is well known and established. Therefore, soul must be a non-product. This is how they evolve their tarka, that is hypothetical reasoning. The next thing is nirnaya, that is dialectics in fact. Dialect is in the form of dialogue between two people who may hold different views and yet wish to establish the truth by seeking agreement with one another. This is very clear. This is in contrast to debate in which two or more persons hold differing views and wish to persuade or prove one another wrong. In dialectics, there is always, possibility of a synthesis. You merge, two ideas could merge. That possibility is there. Okay. The 11th thing which Nyaya says is Vada. The Vada here, the purpose of discussion is to arrive at the truth of the proposition under consideration. This may be achieved by talking about the topic with anyone who is a sincere seeker of truth. In Vada, it is not necessary to establish one's own thesis. It is enough to submit one's views for examination in order to ascertain the truth. Okay. The next is, polemics, jalpa, which means the sole purpose of engaging in a polemic is simply to gain victory over the other party. These are all the Facebook, ways of discussing things. What are all coming is Facebook ways of discussing things, The thing is, these devices are usually have a negative character, such as attacking the opponent's character. That is the hominum, ad hominem, argumentum ad hominem, and quibbling or advancing futile arguments, reducing to absurdity, evading the issue. All these things will come under jalpa. Okay. So focusing on examples or metaphors rather than the actual argument itself. All these things, what we do every day, on Facebook, gets reflected here. Okay. The next is Vidandavada, that is wrangling. That is, there is no desire to establish any proposition. The only interest is to heckle the speaker by copying and offering frivolous objections. Okay. In fact, all these things, they say that if one's philosophy or belief system is under attack, one may also employ these negative means for self-defense. That's what Nyaya says, That's why they included all these things, okay. The other is casuistry. Casuistry is chala, this is 3 types, in fact. That is playing upon words, if you do that, that is when a speaker says that it's quarter bird, okay. So, you may, you tell him that, no, I mistook it for a cart, not for an, and a quarter bird is not an animal, but since it's 4-legged, so I thought it was a cart, not an animal. Okay, this is willfully taking a term to mean something different from that intended by the speaker. This is called playing up. This is called vacha. This is what you are doing it. The second one is generalizations. That is samanyas. This how you do it. This consists of asserting the impossibility of a particular part because of the impossibility of the whole. That is to deny, for example, that is to deny that a particular cow is black because all cows are not black. Okay. If you say that this cow is black, you say that no, it's not black because all cows are not black. This is a generally say this is one way of this one way of casuistry. The third is the metaphors. Metaphors. What they do is invalidating a word used in a particular context by taking it literally. For instance, when I said the entire theatre laughed, so if you reply that nonsense, theatre is is an inanimate thing. How can it laugh? Okay. So my metaphor, you take it literally and find fault with me. Okay. This is one way of casuistry. This is what also the is one of the systems enumerated by the Nyaya Shastra. The other is jati, that is offering objections founded on mere similarity or dissimilarity. For instance, tiger has a tail. Cow has a tail. cow doesn't eat meat. Therefore, tiger also doesn't eat meat. If you can offer, objections or logic like this, this is futile. You can't, discuss like this. Okay. Finally, clinchers, there is Nigrahasthana. The Nyaya says, this is very, very important. You should listen to me carefully. Nyaya says, there's no purpose in entering into a debate with one who demonstrates an utter lack of understanding of the subject being investigated. Unfortunately, this is what we are doing again and again and again. Therefore, one is advised to stop the discussion the moment the other demonstrates an ignorance of or misunderstanding of the subject under discussion. There are given 22 disagreements, occasions of disagreement in principle. I don't want to go into all these things. He says any of these will, if you indulge with them, any of this will result in the loss of debate. So you don't go anywhere near them. So Nyaya says, if you follow all these things in your life, when you examine a truth, finally you will understand what truth is. Finally you will get liberated. This is a process which will happen continuously in your life. That's what the Nyaya system says. Now, let us turn to the Vaiseshika system. Vaiseshika is also committed to thoroughgoing realism. It assumes that there is a structured world out there, one that is independent of human conceptions and thought. It is also very, very important. It assumes that there's a structured world out there, one that is independent of human conceptions and thought. It is also a world we can understand, in the first instance, by offering a classification or division of reality into various types. The Vaiseshika school, therefore, attempts to identify, inventory, and classify the entities and the relations that present themselves to human perceptions. This is very, very important. Again, I will repeat this. In fact, the Vaiseshika school attempts to identify, inventory, and classify the entities and the relations that present themselves to human perceptions. It lists six such things which are called padarthas, to which was added a seventh. Later, another seventh thing was also added. The six things are: one is dravya, which means substance, the substratum that exists independently of all categories and the material cause of all things produced from it. Dravyas are 9 in number. This is like our Prakriti, in fact, Dravya, that's what, more or less it is that, Dravyas are 9 in number, that's earth, water, fire, ether or akasha, time, space, spirit and mind. The second one is guna, that is quality, which in turn is subdivided into 24 species. The third one is karma or action. Both guna and karma inhere. Inhere means exist permanently. In this word will be used again and again, in philosophy. So if I use inner, please don't, it is from inheritance. You say inner means exist permanently in. Guna and karma inner within dravya and cannot exist independently of it. Okay, the other one is samanya, that is genus, which denotes characteristic similarities that allow two or more objects to be classed together. Okay. The other one is, the next one is vishesha, or specific difference, which singles out an individual of that class. The sixth one is samavaya, that is inherence, that is what you inherit, which indicates that things inseparably connected. Okay, these are the six things. This is the way the Vaisheshika system classify reality. Okay, to this was later added abhava, that is non-existence or absence. Okay, abhava is non-existence and absence, though negative in content. The impression it makes is positive. One has a perception of an absence where one misses something. 4 such absences are recognized. That is previous absence as of a new product. For instance, before the invention of computer, nobody knew what a computer was. Okay. Next is later absence as of a destroyed object. Okay. There was a fort here, this fort was destroyed. Now there is no fort there, but earlier there was a fort here. Okay. The third is total absence. It says, for instance, wind has no color. Okay. There is no absence of color in the wind, that is the one. The next one is called reciprocal absence. That is, if you take let's say a jar and a cloth, okay, there is no, the quality of cloth is absent in jar and the quality of jar is absent in the cloth. So neither of which is the other. This is called reciprocal absence. The Vaisheshika system holds, this is very, very important, please listen to me carefully. The entire world, the entire universe, okay, has the smallest indivisible, indestructible part, which is called an anu. All physical things are a combination of the anus or the atoms of earth, water, fire and air. Again I will repeat, the Vaisheshika system holds that all physical things are a combination of the atoms of earth, water, fire and air. Inactive and motionless in themselves. The atoms are inactive and motionless themselves. The atoms are put into motion by God's will. That is, He is the Nimitta Karana. I will come to that later, Nimitta Karana. By God's will, through the unseen forces of merit and demerit. This is what Nyaya philosophy holds. Okay. They say everything is real, everything is composed of atoms, and the atoms and the combination of atoms is how the universe functions. Okay. Kanada is a complete defender of metaphysical realism about substances, their properties, and the universals they apply to these things. Okay. He is also a realist about complex things, This means that for him, over and above an aggregate or collection of parts, that's avayava, that's an objects called a whole. Whole. That is WHOOLE. Avayavin. Okay, that's what he says. The wholes, they include objects of ordinary experience. This is a slightly complex. I will explain this again. He says parts are there and the whole is there. Okay. And the whole it includes every object of ordinary experience. When you hold, I will give an example. When you hold a book in your hands, you are holding something more than pages, covers and spine. Okay. They are all parts. pages are part, cover is a part, and spine is a part, but that's not a book. Book is a complete whole, that is a whole. Or when you ride a chariot, you are borne along by something more than axles, wheels, and carriage. Okay. In fact, Russell captured this view absolutely nicely when he said that a whole, that is WHOLE, a whole is a new single term distinct from each of its parts and from all of them. That is, it is distinct. Okay, it is totally different. Okay, and each of its part from all of them. Okay, it is one, not many, and is related to the parts, but has a being distinct from theirs. Okay, this is what it says. Okay, what it says is, Vaisheshika, again let me tell you, there is part, there is whole. Okay, the whole is distinct from the part. Okay, though is made of parts, the whole is distinct from the parts. Now, the Vaisheshika view faced of, no, this is very, very, very interesting and important. Now I am going to bring in the Buddhist objection to this. I am going to bring in the Buddhist objection to this. The Vaisheshika's view faced a formidable opponent. That is, the Buddhist philosophers who took such objects as books and chariots and the objects of everyday experience to be fabrications or constructions of our minds. Okay. The Buddhists offered two distinct, see why I am saying this is how discussions take place. This is very, very important. From now onwards I will start doing this. This is how discussions take place in our philosophical systems. Okay. The Buddhists offered two distinct lines of argument. The first is that the concepts of things like chariots or books are formed from nothing more than momentary sensory experiences. You feel that it is there, therefore you think it is real. That's what he says. Okay. If this is so, then there need be no persisting chariot, only a stream of fleeting impressions. Okay. Second, the Buddhist, this is important. No? Buddhist, this is a core of the Buddhist philosophy. Second, the Buddhists also doubt that there is a single enduring person who is experiencing these impressions one after the other. That's a chariot. I am reading a book. Okay. You said you think that you are doing it, but the Buddhists even question you. No. You said there is a single enduring person. Okay. In fact, a person may seem to be a kind of whole made out of parts, but it is a central Buddhist tenet that there is no enduring self. Okay, there is no Atma, nothing is there. And that giving up belief in the illusion of Atma, that is a step towards liberation. That's what the Buddhists hold. Okay. The Vaisheshikas, they were clever. No, what they say is, he says, the Vaisheshika objection is this. They say, if a chariot is not really a whole, that is WHOLE, but just a bunch of parts, then what is the difference between a chariot and a random bag of unrelated things? Let's say a bag which has a collection of bones or an old videotape of Sholay or Tilana Moganambal and a few t-shirts. Okay. There you have things that fail to form a single coherent whole. Okay. But this is a coherent whole. Whatever I am showing is a coherent whole. So what is the difference between these two things? If chariot is not really a whole. Okay. So the Buddhist view say that such a random assortment of objects would be no different than the chariot. Because you have got three different perceptions, sensory perceptions. Like chariot is one perception. Okay. The Vaisheshikas hold that there is a metaphysical difference between these two cases. A random assortment is not a true whole, whereas a chariot is a real thing made up of parts. Okay. So the Buddhists again come back to them, to the Vaisheshikas, and they say that we distinguish these two sorts of cases simply as a matter of convention. Human concerns and interests make it more useful to speak about a chariot than a collection of things, okay, like consisting of a bone or videotape and t-shirts. But neither whole is more real than the other. He says that is collection of things is also not real, and the whole is also not real. Okay, this is what the Buddhists say. The Buddhists, in fact, they persist on banishing familiar objects and persons from the inventory of reality. They say they are not real. Whereas the Vaisheshikas, they want to validate every one of our everyday assumptions we use. Okay. In fact, they say the burden of proof is with you. See, I see this. You will have to tell me that why it is not true. Buddhist, he says, Buddhist. When the Vaisheshika asks the Buddhists, if you say that they are all, they are not real, it doesn't happen. It doesn't become unreal just because you say so. Okay, you will have to prove it. So the Buddhists, they give several arguments for their anti-realist position. Okay. What they say is, for one thing, at least some of the objects of everyday experience actually are mere sums of parts. That is, a forest is nothing more than a bunch of trees, or an army is nothing more than a bunch of soldiers, or more recently, let us say, consider again a film like Tilana Mohanambal or Sholay. No matter how coherent is narrative, it is actually just a series of images which are shown in rapid succession to produce the illusion of continuity. Furthermore, when shown on a computer, on a digital screen, the movie is just built up out of individual, let's say, pixels of light that coherent to a single image, much like an impressionist painting seen from a distance. Clearly, some apparently real wholes are nothing more than assemblage of parts, whose unity is a matter of illusion or convention. We don't see Shivaji Ganeshan or Amitabh Bachchan, real Amitabh Bachchan. We imagine that he is there, Amitabh Bachchan is there, Shivaji Ganeshan is there because of the mixing of pixels. Okay. So the Buddhists say that here, if you think that this unity, when you see Amitabh Bachchan, when you see Shivaji Ganeshan, it's a convention because you see in 2 dimensions, you imagine that the real person is there. Okay. It seems, if that can be accepted, it doesn't seem, it doesn't seem, unreal to assume that there are no real wholes. Okay. And when we know that a mere collection of parts can generate a convincing yet false impression that there is such a whole. That is, in a film, imagine that Shivaji Ganeshan is acting, is there, but actually it is a collection of pixels. If that can be unreal, so what you see now, what you see outside is also unreal. Because if someone, after some time, you will get the knowledge that it is unreal, then you will realize that it is unreal. Now you imagine that it is real. This is what the Buddhists say. The Vaisheshikas reply to this is very, very interesting. The Vaisheshikas reply to this line of argument. In fact, they are vulnerable to this line of, because they say that like pixels, the Vaisheshika school, they hold that familiar objects around us like chariots are actually collections of atoms. Okay. So what they say is, why not think that chariot is just an illusion created by the conjunction of atoms? Okay. The Vaisheshikas, they are not they are not flabbergasted, or they are not pushed back by this argument of the Buddhists. What they say is very, very simple. The Vaisheshikas say that the individual atoms are too small to be perceived. So, it cannot be that when I look at a chariot, I am seeing a vast number of atoms and bringing together my experience of them as one lovely thing that takes me around. That is my chariot which takes me around. To the contrary, I cannot see the individual atoms at all. This means that the chariot in front of me must be a real thing over and above the atoms. If the only real things present were atoms, there would be nothing for me to perceive. That is what Vaisheshika says in simple words. If you are not able to perceive the atom, you will also not able to perceive a combination of these atoms. That's what the Vaisheshika says. Okay. So, since I perceive this, atoms are real, so what I perceive, the combination of atoms should also be real. That's what the Vaisheshika, that's how the Vaisheshika argue. See, another Buddhist argument focus on the relationship. This is also a very, very, very important thing. You should listen to me carefully. Another Buddhist argument focus on the relationship between the supposed whole and the parts of which it is made. That is whole and the parts. Okay, the Vaisheshika say that the whole inheres in its part. The whole exists in its parts. Okay, or we might say it resides or occurs in them. Okay, the book resides in its pages and cover. It's simple. No, a book resides in its pages and cover. Okay. Now the Buddhists, they tries to force the Vaisheshikas into a dilemma by asking a question. Does the book reside in each page? He says that's impossible. He says if the book is entirely in page 99, it can also be entirely in page 100. Because since it would be in two different places at the same time. So the book must reside only partly in each page. But then the whole is actually divided up into as many bits as it has parts. Okay. So whereas the Vaisheshika's idea was to insist that the whole is a unity over and above these parts. So the Buddhists say that you can't take, when you say it is unity, the whole is complete, you can't say that it can reside in parts. Okay. So now, the Vaisheshika, they try to clarify this conception of part-whole relationship. What they say is, they say, let us first consider the kind of inherence involved when a universal inheres in its particulars. That is, they make three different things. One is a universal thing, one is a whole thing, the other is a part thing. This is slightly complicated, but I have to tell you this. That is the universal idea and the whole idea and the parts. Okay. Let us take an example. I will give an example, then it will be clear. Let us take an example of a crocodile. Okay. The Vaisheshika, there is an universal idea of a crocodile. That's a real thing. Okay. But they are also convinced that its reality depends on there being actual particular crocodile. So if we got rid of one crocodile and all other crocodiles, there would no longer be an universal. Thus we can say that the universal is inseparable from its instances. The same thing goes for the inherent relations between a whole and its part. The chariot is more than just the axle, wheels and carriage, but could not exist if these parts did not exist. Yet, the case of the whole is not exactly like the case of the universals. The Vaisheshikas assume that the universes are eternal and uncreated. Though they depend on particular instances to exist, there are always some instances around so that the universals never vanish. This is not true of wholes. That is, again let me repeat, a book or a videotape or a crocodile will all break up and disappear eventually. But the universal, the idea of a book or an idea of crocodile will remain, that will always be there. That's what the Vaisheshika says. For this reason, they recognizes the part that make up a whole as a special kind of a cause. Okay. Which they call a substate, that is Samayavin. Okay. The difference between this and the universal case is that the universal can survive even when these instances do not. The universal nature of a crocodile is untroubled by the fact that the crocodile die as long as other crocodiles are born to replace them. It only needs there to be some relevant instances, and it doesn't matter which ones. A whole, by contrast, cannot survive without its particular parts surviving. What he says is, let us say a crocodile loses leg or a crocodile dies. That doesn't mean that there will not be another crocodile. The crocodile will always be there. The universal crocodile will always be there. That's what it says. So the whole may die, but the universal principle will remain. This is what the Vaisheshika philosophy says. Okay. So what it says is universals depend on their instances, and the whole depends on its parts for survival. So that the instances are causes of the universal, the parts, the causes of the whole. Now, what is important is the basic question involved in any theory of causation. Earlier we discussed this in Sankhya philosophy. Does the effect pre-exist in its material cause? The Sankhya philosophy, the Yoga, the Mimamsaka, the Advaitis, they are all called, we discussed about Satkaryavadin, so they are all Satkaryavada. They say that yes, the effect pre-exists in the material cause. That is, the principle of jar exists in the clay. That is what Advaita says, Sankhya says, Yoga says, Mimamsaka says. But Nyaya Vaisheshika and of course Buddhists, they say that no. They say that it doesn't exist at all. They say, that is, Nyaya Vaisheshika is very, very important. Nyaya Vaisheshika view of causation is directly opposed to the Sankhya, Yoga and Vedanta views. That they are called Satkaryavada, this is called Asatkaryavada or Arambhavada. What it says is, the effect is non-existent before its creation. What they say is, there are absolutely no part in the clay. Okay? So when a part comes about, it's called a new beginning, Arambha. That's why it's called Arambhavada, a fresh creation. It is distinct from its cause and can never be identical with it. They say that the part is distinct from the clay and can never be identical with the clay. If it is neither an appearance nor a transformation of the cause, it is newly brought into existence by the operation of the cause. So they are giving three, is very scientific in fact. They are giving three kinds of causes: Samayavi and Asamayavi and Nimitta. That is, Samayavi is inherent, Samayavi is inherent cause. That is, it is a substance out of which the effect is produced. I'll give an example. For example, the threads are the inherent cause of the cloth, and the clay is the inherent cause of a pot. Okay, the effect inheres in its material cause. The cloth, in fact, it inheres in its thread. The effect cannot exist separately from its material cause, though the cause can exist independently of its effect. Okay, there cannot be any cloth without threads, but threads can exist without clothes. That's what they say. The material cause is always a substance. Upadana or a material cause is always a substance. In the absence of clay, we cannot have parts. In the same way, in the absence of atoms, we cannot have a universe. This is what it says. Okay. The other is non-inherent cause. That is, it inheres in the material cause and helps the production of the effect. For instance, unless the threads, the conjoins, the conjunction of threads, that is the non-inherence of cause of a cloth. Okay. Or the color of the threads is a non-inherent cause of the cloth. Okay. The non-inherent cause is always a quality or an action. The third is very important. That's called nimitta karana. That is the efficient cause. It is the power which helps the material cause is the nimitta, that is efficient. It is a power which helps the material cause to produce the effect. Okay. The weaver is the efficient cause of the cloth. Okay. The efficient cause also includes the accessories, the loom and the shuttle of the weaver, or the staff and the wheel of the potter. All these things are efficient causes. So the efficient cause may be a substance, a quality, or an action. In fact, the Nyaya and Vaisheshika, using this logic, believe that Ishvara created the universe with the ultimate particles called anus, that is atoms. Here, Ishvara is considered the nimitta karana and the anus are the upadana karana. To shape a clay into a pot, a potter is needed. Without him, there is no earthen pot. Or in other words, the pot without the potter is non-existent. It's very important. This is what he says. To shape the clay into a pot is needed. Without him, there is no earthen pot. So when he shapes it out of the clay, he is the cause, the pot, the effect. This is called the Arambhavada. Okay. The non-existent part, there's no part in mere clay. The non-existent part is produced from the clay. It is in similar fashion that Ishvara created the universe with the anus. What he created did not exist in the particles. Okay. There is no universe in the atoms. Okay. The atoms, the universe was created out of the atoms. Just like a pot was created out of clay. This is how Nyaya and Vaisheshikas argue. Okay. Thank you very much for listening to me. And as I said, if you find my lectures interesting, please consider making a small contribution to a charity or a cause of your choice. Okay. You need not inform me, but if you did, I would be delighted. Thank you very much and good night and stay safe. Thank you. Wonderful.